Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, August 15, 2025. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin shake hands on the tarmac at a U.S. military base in Anchorage, Alaska, to start their historic summit on how to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. On the way over, President Trump telling reporters he was looking to broker a ceasefire and was not going to be happy if Putin doesn't agree to it. And also the president said, "I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine." District of Columbia sues the Trump administration after U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announces an expansion of federal control of the city's police department by installing an emergency police commissioner and revoking policies that limit officers' cooperation with immigration enforcement. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announces the start of a second special legislative session after Democrats have successfully blocked for 2 weeks passage of a redrawn congressional district map that would increase the number of Republican U.S. House seats. And Mike Castle, a longtime Republican politician from Delaware, has died at age 86. The current Delaware governor, Matt Meyer, a Democrat, says Mike Castle was a remarkable public servant as governor and our state's longest-serving U.S. representative. He embodied what it means to lead with principle, decency, and dedication. CBS News writes that President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are meeting in Alaska on Friday for a high-stakes summit over ending the war in Ukraine. The meeting comes as Mr. Trump has pushed Russia to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine, which Russia invaded in 2022. Both leaders greeted each other after landing at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, where the bilateral meetings are set to be held. Mr. Trump and Putin are expected to hold a joint press conference after the talks. That was from CBS News. As he left D.C. flying on Air Force One, the president spoke with reporters about what he is trying to accomplish.
There's nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do. But they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as will Zelensky. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing. You know, we're not putting up any money. We're making money. They're buying our weapons, and we're sending them to NATO, and NATO's sending us big, beautiful checks. But I don't care about that. I care about, it was a big factor when Biden spent $350 million and got nothing. But what I do care about is they lost last week 7,011 people were lost, almost all soldiers. 36 people in a town which got hit by a missile. But over 7,000 soldiers. It's crazy.
Can you describe a little bit, Mr. President, because I know you've had a lot of phone calls with President Putin. What's the difference in a face-to-face, in-person meeting?
No different. Look, he's a smart guy. Been doing it for a long time, but so have I. Been doing it for a long time. And here we are, we're president. And that was much more difficult than what I'm doing today, believe me. So, we get along. There's a good respect level on both sides, and I think, something's going to come of it. I notice he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia, and that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled.
Are you going to talk about business?
They need business. We have the hottest country on earth. We have the hottest economy on earth. We have the hottest country. We just set a new stock market record again. We have hundreds of billions of dollars flowing in from tariffs. We're the hottest country. We were a dead country, like doornails, a dead country. 1 year ago, we were dead as a doornail. And now we have the hottest country. And he wants a piece of that because his country is not hot economically. In fact, it's the opposite. And China's not doing well economically. But look, I want everybody to do well. The war's going to stop and the killing's going to stop.
Mr. President, what do you mean by secure consequences? Coming back to take questions. We saw that Russia continued its violence into Ukraine last night, launching even more drones. What did you make of that?
Well, I think they're trying to negotiate. He's trying to set a stage. I mean, in his mind, that helps him make a better deal. It actually hurts him. But in his mind, that helps him make a better deal if they can continue the killing. Maybe it's a part of the world. Maybe it's just his fabric, his genes, his genetics. But he thinks that makes him, gives him strength in negotiating. I think it hurts him, but I'll be talking to him about it.
And is on the table for discussions today, Mr. President,
think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table, and I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine. But he's not going to do it.
Mr. President, what did you mean?
Just one thing. What about
Don't underestimate that either.
the possibility of the United States providing security guarantees to Ukraine?
Maybe.
Is that on the
Along with
table?
Europe and other countries.
You would be
Not in the form of NATO, because that's not going to, there are certain things that aren't going to happen. But, yeah, along with Europe, there's a possibility of that.
You mentioned the number of business people that President Putin is bringing along. Is that something that you want to discuss with President Putin at this meeting?
Yeah, if we make progress, I would discuss it, because that's one of the things that they would like. They'd like to get a piece of what I built in terms of the economy. Just so you know, we were a dead country with our economy. He wouldn't be interested. He wouldn't have been interested a year ago with the Biden economy. But he is interested in the Trump economy, because we're doing. Wait till you see when those factories start opening up.
President Donald Trump speaking with reporters on Air Force One, flying from the Washington, D.C. area to Anchorage, Alaska, to meet up with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who flew in to hold a summit about the war in Ukraine. More from the CBS News article about the arrival. In a carefully choreographed moment, Mr. Trump descended the steps of Air Force One moments before Putin came down the steps of his plane, stepping onto U.S. soil for the first time in about a decade. Both Mr. Trump and Putin walked down their respective red carpets, with Mr. Trump waiting for Putin at the end and clapping. Both Mr. Trump and Putin extended their hands and shook, patting each other on the arm and exchanging words as they smiled. The two ascended the platform in front of the fighter jets, where they shook hands again. Neither Mr. Trump nor Putin answered shouted questions from reporters. Other fighter jets flew overhead. In an unusual moment, Putin joined Mr. Trump in his vehicle, the Beast, with seemingly no aides or interpreters with them. Putin smiled as the vehicle began to drive away. That was from CBS News. There was a brief pool spray, cameras allowed in as the first meetings began.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Mr. Putin, will you agree to a ceasefire?
Thank you, press.
Mr. Putin, will you commit to not killing any more civilians?
Thank you, press. Let's go. Come on, guys. Thank you, press.
Let's go.
Mr. President,
Thank you, press.
President Putin, why should President Trump trust your word now?
Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
We've got to
Thank
go.
you, press.
Thank you, press.
Thank you, press.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Everybody get out of the room.
That was as the first meeting began, and Associated Press writing that the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters aboard Air Force One that President Trump won't be meeting President Putin alone, as she had previewed earlier in the week, but instead will be joined by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Leavitt said it would be a 3-on-3 meeting instead of a 1-on-1. And his planned lunch meeting with Putin was to include Rubio and Witkoff, along with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. That was from Associated Press. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, the ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee, was on CNN today talking about this summit.
President Putin spoke out this morning with new comments ahead of the summit, in part saying that the current American administration is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict. Senator, how do you interpret that?
Listen, if you believe what Vladimir Putin has to say, I have some wetland in Madbury, New Hampshire that I can sell you. You can't believe anything Vladimir Putin says. He is a former KGB agent who is trained in manipulation. He is going to do everything he can to string along Donald Trump, to string along America, and to continue this war in a way that allows him to continue to build up, continue to make gains on the battlefield. And until we put some real pressure on Russia, until we provide additional weapons and support to Ukraine, and I have legislation, bipartisan legislation to do that, until we crack down on those people like China who are enabling Russia to continue its war machine, I have bipartisan legislation with Senator Cornyn on that. He is going to continue to play us along.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee, today on CNN. Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican of Alaska, writing on X, Putin is coming to the table because of the threat of serious secondary sanctions. We are in a position of power, bringing him to U.S. soil for peace talks. He sees our military strength, energy dominance, many allies, and a president who knows how to negotiate and make peace. That was a post from Senator Sullivan. Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, a Republican, posted this video after Air Force One landed in Anchorage.
Historic day here in Alaska. Just got off of Air Force One, meeting with the president. Had a brief meeting with him, talked about a number of things. He wants to let Alaska know that he loves Alaska. And he's looking forward to something positive coming out of these talks today. We don't know what that's going to be. Time will tell. They're meeting right now. Also, we talked to the president about these rumors that Alaska's minerals are going to be sold off to the Russians, or Alaskans' gas is going to be transported by the Russians. We spoke with him and some of his staff on the plane, and that's not true. This is, some would say that's fake news. Some would say that's rumors. But nonetheless, it was a quick meeting. It was a good meeting. Again, he loves Alaska, excited about what's happening up here with the gas line and critical minerals and other things that he's working on as well. And he quickly wrapped up the meeting so he could prepare to speak with the Russian president that had also landed at the same time. And again, we're optimistic that this is the beginning of something good, hopefully a just peace. But we're just glad to have him here in Alaska. I think it's one of his favorite places, to be honest with you. And just had a great conversation. It was short, but a great conversation.
Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, a Republican, posting that video. President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social early this morning 2 words, high stakes. It was all caps, followed by 3 exclamation points. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky wrote on X, "Today I expect a report from our intelligence on the current intentions of the Russian side and its preparations for the meeting in Alaska. Indeed, high stakes. The key thing is that this meeting should open up a real path toward a just peace and a substantive discussion between leaders in a trilateral format, Ukraine, the United States, and the Russian side. It is time to end the war, and the necessary steps must be taken by Russia. We are counting on America. We are ready, as always, to work as productively as possible." That was the post from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee, told the Raging Moderates podcast that she would nominate President Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize if he's able to help end the war in Ukraine without Ukraine giving up territory.
I understand from everything I've read, he very much would like to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And honestly, if he could bring about the end to this terrible war where Putin is the aggressor, invading a neighbor country, try to change the borders, if he could end it without putting Ukraine in a position where it had to concede its territory to the aggressor, had to, in a way, validate Putin's vision of greater Russia, but instead could really stand up to Putin, something we haven't seen, but maybe this is the opportunity, to make it clear that there must be a ceasefire, there will be no exchange of territory, and that over a period of time, Putin should be actually withdrawing from the territory he seized in order to demonstrate his good faith efforts, let us say, not to threaten European security. You know, look, if we could pull that off, if President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Because my goal here is to not allow capitulation to Putin, aided and abetted by the United States. I think that's a terrible, terrible precedent, and I think it would make our country less safe. I think it would reward Putin's aggression, and he will not stop. We know that. So, you know, you can dream, Jessica, you can dream, and I'm dreaming that for whatever combination of reasons, including the elusive Nobel Peace Prize, President Trump may actually stand up to Putin on behalf of not just Ukraine and its democracy and its very brave people, but frankly, on behalf of our own security and interests.
Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State and former Democratic presidential nominee, previewing the Alaska summit between President Trump and President Putin on the war in Ukraine. She spoke on the Raging Moderates podcast, and President Trump was asked about what Hillary Clinton just said, asked by Fox News anchor Bret Baier on Air Force One. The president responded, "That's very nice. I might have to start liking her again." Vladimir Kara-Murza, Russian opposition leader and Free Russia Foundation vice president, on Thursday was asked about Russian President Vladimir Putin's style in interacting with other world leaders. He was at a conference in D.C. hosted by the Institute for the Study of Modern Authoritarianism.
You mentioned Anchorage, and you've obviously watched Putin over many years. Can you give us some insight into the ways that Putin manipulates others? His KGB training, perhaps? I've seen that speculated about. But to the degree you can, offer us some insights into the way Putin operates one-on-one with Trump in private.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this. This is a really important question, because Putin himself has said publicly on several occasions that the favorite part of his job when he worked in the Soviet KGB was recruiting. He said it himself. And we have to admit it, he's a pretty good recruiter. He's good at what he does, because what a recruiter has to do is to basically make the interlocutor like him, make the interlocutor think that he thinks like him, that they're of the same mind, to make the interlocutor sympathize with him on a human level. And there are countless and countless and countless examples of this over the years. But I'll give just three for the purpose of time, but also because all those three happen to be your presidents. The first meeting of Putin with President George W. Bush in Slovenia in 2001. Now, he knew, because he has his KGB guys bringing him folders with papers and with a detailed dossier on every person he's going to be meeting with. He knew that George W. Bush is a devout Christian. So what does he tell him? He tells him a story about how his dacha burned out many years ago, and the only thing that survived was a cross that his mother has given him. Anyone with even a little knowledge of Soviet history, a KGB officer wearing a cross, he would have been sacked and arrested the next day. I mean, religion was, for all intents and purposes, banned in the Soviet Union. Definitely for state officials, that was never allowed. So this story is complete baloney, but I guess President Bush didn't know much of Russian history, so he just fell for it. And it was then that he went out to that press conference and said that I looked into Putin's eyes and got a sense of his soul. It was after that story. Example number one. Example number two, President Obama, who came to power, who won elections in this country on the promise of reform and modernization and hope and change. So what does Putin do? He puts in a puppet president, which conveniently also helped him circumvent the constitutional term limits by remaining fully in charge, but having a puppet president, so-called president named Dmitry Medvedev, who talks about what? Who talks about reform and modernization and hope and change and all the rest of it. And the Obama reset policy was a complete disaster with regard to Putin, and it led to the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And that's how Putin used his recruitment skills against that American administration. And finally, the current resident of the White House. When I read that story that Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff went to Moscow, and Putin told him that he went to the church to pray for Trump after the assassination attempt, and he gave him an oil painting of him because he knew that personal vanity is something that's going to work with this guy. And he was seriously talking about this. Oh my God, how old is he, first of all? I mean, has he ever heard of who Putin is? Because he's been there for 25 years. That's not something that's new or fresh here. And yeah, it is funny, but it's also really sad how Western governments and Western leaders continue to keep falling for this recruiting tactics of an old KGB officer. But those are just three examples. There are many, many more I could give, but then we would really be violating the time limit. So we'll have to stop on there. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much once again.
Vladimir Kara-Murza, Russian opposition leader and vice president of the Free Russia Foundation, on Thursday at a conference in Washington about the challenges facing liberal societies. It was hosted by the Institute for the Study of Modern Authoritarianism. And the summit in Anchorage, Alaska, at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson with President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is ongoing as we head to air at just after 5 p.m. Eastern. We are expecting a news conference with the two sometime later tonight, Friday night. and we will bring it to you live when it happens on the C-SPAN networks. And this is Washington Today. Story from Reuters. Britain's King Charles on Friday released a message commemorating the 80th anniversary of VJ Day, which marks the Allied victory over Japan and the end of World War II, reflecting on current conflicts and warning that the cost of war reaches far beyond battlefields. While fighting in Europe ended in May 1945, the conflict with Japan continued until it signaled its intention to surrender on August 15th that year after atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States. Reporting from Reuters, King Charles recorded an audio message that was released today.
For the millions of families gathered around their wireless sets, and for their loved ones still serving far from home, it was the message a battle-weary world had long prayed for. The war is over, declared my grandfather, King George VI, in his address to the nation and Commonwealth on VJ Day 80 years ago today. 4 short words after 6 long years of bloodshed, fear, and suffering. Seldom can a simple message have resonated with such a potent mix of relief, celebration, and sorrow for those who never lived to see the glow of freedom's new dawn. On this day of profound remembrance, I speak to you in that same spirit of commemoration and celebration as we honor anew all those whose service and sacrifice saw the forces of liberty prevail.
Great Britain's King Charles III opening an audio message released today. He also spoke in the message about non-combatants who suffered in World War II and related it to modern-day wars.
Innocent civilian populations of occupied territories faced grievous hardships too. Their experience reminds us that war's true cost extends beyond battlefields, touching every aspect of life. A tragedy all too vividly demonstrated by conflicts around the world today. On this landmark anniversary, we should also pause to acknowledge that in the war's final act, an immense price was paid by the citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a price we pray no nation need ever pay again. But in recalling so much suffering, we must not lose sight of how great was the cause and how sweet the victory. For those heroes of VJ Day gave us more than freedom. They left us the example of how it can and must be protected.
King Charles III, part of his audio message on VJ Day. In Great Britain, 80 years ago, Japan surrendered to the Allied powers, ending World War II. The United States marks VJ Day on September 2nd, the day of the formal surrender signing on the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Past president, why are you doing this? This is outrageous.
This is a kangaroo court.
This fall, C-SPAN presents a rare moment of unity, Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. Join Political Playbook Chief Correspondent and White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns as host of Ceasefire, bringing 2 leaders from opposite sides of the aisle into a dialogue to find common ground. Ceasefire, this fall on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. WRC-TV, NBC4 in Washington reports that less than 12 hours after the Trump administration seemingly replaced Washington, D.C.'s police chief with a federal officer, the district is headed to federal court to block the move. D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab filed a lawsuit against the federal government Friday, claiming President Donald Trump has far exceeded the authority granted him in D.C.'s Home Rule Act. The administrative Procedure Act and the U.S. Constitution. Schwab is seeking a temporary restraining order and to block U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's Thursday night order naming the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration as D.C.'s emergency police commissioner with all the powers of the police chief. It also aims to ensure that Metropolitan Police Department Chief Pamela Smith remains in control of D.C.'s police department. The lawsuit comes less than a week after the historic federalization of D.C.'s police department. That was from NBC4 in Washington. Attorney General made the announcement on Fox News Thursday night, where she also said she was rescinding any order limiting inquiries into immigration status and preventing arrests based solely on federal immigration warrants.
At my directive, we have made Terry Cole now the commissioner over the police. We have made Gaddy Serralto my U.S. Marshal. He runs the entire show, keeping everyone organized, and they report directly to me, and I report to the President of the United States. So, yes, you must comply. You must give the information to our ICE, to our Homeland Security officers. If they have information of an illegal alien living in D.C., they must give us that information. And we are going to stop crime, Sean, in D.C., and we're going to clean it up in this country. And President Trump is committed to that. No longer is that going to happen in this beautiful city where our tourists come, where our residents live. We all live here. We are going to keep it safe. And it's our nation's capital. It's beautiful, and it's going to be beautiful and clean again.
U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi on the Fox News channel Thursday night. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat who had been traveling to Massachusetts for a family commitment, now back in D.C. today, writing on X, "Let us be clear about what the law requires during a presidential declared emergency. It requires the mayor of Washington, D.C. to provide the services of the Metropolitan Police Department for federal purposes at the request of the president. We have followed the law. In reference to the U.S. Attorney General's order, there is no statute that conveys the district's personnel authority to a federal official." That was the post from the D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. And Washington, D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab filed a lawsuit today and then went on CNN to talk about it.
The President and the Attorney General of the United States have attempted an illegal, hostile takeover of our local police force, the Metropolitan Police Department. And in so doing, they have sowed chaos and endangered the public safety and the residents and visitors to the District of Columbia. The Home Rule Act, which grants authority to the local government here in the District of Columbia, including to control the police, gives the president very limited authority to seek to have the assistance of the MPD and the mayor if there is a federal emergency that requires that. It does not give the president or the attorney general the authority to take over MPD and to purport to change the command and control and governance of MPD. That is exactly what the president and the attorney general's order seek to do. And that is why we are in court this morning seeking to hold the federal government accountable to following the law. The Home Rule Act is a federal law passed by Congress. Nobody is above the law, including the president, and most importantly, our U.S. Attorney General.
I want to dig deeper, Attorney General. You argue in your filing that Trump's actions are, and I'm quoting now from your document, putting the safety of D.C. residents and visitors at risk, close quote. But since this takeover happened, the Trump administration is touting dozens of criminal arrests for assault and distribution of illegal drugs. It's also saying that at least 10 handguns have been seized. Do you see any of that as progress?
Look, over the last week, there has been a lot of confusion and chaos in the city, but what has been clear is that the chief of police, under the guidance of the mayor, has been working with federal law enforcement, which, by the way, we do all day, every day here in this city. But the disruption, the takeover, or purported takeover of MPD, throws that into chaos and confusion. And as Chief Smith has said in the papers, in her nearly 30 years of enforcing the law, both as a federal law enforcement officer and as chief of police, she has never seen any action that causes more risk to the public safety than the actions of AG Bondi last night in her Bondi order of about 7:45 at night.
Washington, D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab today on CNN. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson putting out a statement in response to the lawsuit. The Trump administration has the lawful authority to assert control over the D.C. police, which is necessary due to the emergency that has arisen in our nation's capital as a result of failed leadership. The Democrats' efforts to stifle this tremendous progress are par for the course for the defund the police, criminals first Democrat Party. This is Washington Today. The Texan.news writes the second special session of the 89th Texas legislature kicked off almost immediately after the first one adjourned sine die due to House Democrats breaking quorum with an almost identical agenda from Governor Greg Abbott. After the Texas House Democratic Caucus prevented a quorum within the Texas House for 2 weeks to avoid a vote on congressional redistricting, the first special session was brought to a close 4 days prior to its 30-day deadline on August 19th in anticipation of its now active second special. There were 97 members present when the House gavelled in for the second session at noon, leaving it without a quorum. The House is set to meet again on Saturday, 10 a.m. That's Texas time, and that's reporting from the Texan.news. The Texas House Speaker, Dustin Burrows, a Republican, closed out the first session today.
Members, we are about to receive a motion to sine die. Do not go very far, as I believe our governor will be calling us back for another special session very, very soon. Mr. Guerin moves that the House of Representatives of the first called session of the 89th legislature stand adjourned sine die. Is there objection? Chair hears none. House stands adjourned sine die.
The Texas House Speaker Dustin Burrows, a Republican, presiding over today's brief session, and Governor Greg Abbott, also a Republican, did call a second 30-day special legislative session with the same agenda as the first that includes congressional redistricting that Republicans say will give them an advantage in 5 more U.S. House seats in Texas. Texas State Representative Brian Harrison, a Republican, posted this video as he left today's session in Austin.
Howdy neighbors, Brian Harrison here, walking out of the Capitol here in Austin with just a quick update. Just walked off the floor, and guys, it's official. The first special session is over. The Democrats have won. They were able to thwart the Republican priorities, every single one of them. That includes redistricting, that includes property tax relief, and because of the weak, effectively non-response, I would argue assistance, of the supposedly Republican leadership, in particular in the Texas House, the Democrats have allowed them to do something even bigger than just thwarting the items that were on the agenda for special session. They have been able to move around the country freely without arrests to galvanize national public support against our very urgently needed redistricting efforts. And so the bottom line is this. The Democrats have won. They wiped the floor, in fact, with the Republican elected leadership in the state of Texas, who has exacted exactly 0 punishments on even a single one of these rogue Democrats, despite all the promises to vacate their seats and arrest them. There have been 0 Democrats with their seats vacated. There have been 0 Democrats arrested. Not one Democrat's been pulled off a single committee. Not one Democrat committee chairman, yes, Democrats chair committees in Texas, has lost their chairmanships. Not one Democrat has had their seniority taken off. Not one Democrat has had the governor, speaker, or lieutenant governor pledge to kill their legislation. Guys, I'm sorry. You deserve and you demand results and actions. You elected President Trump in a 14-point landslide. You want bold Republican leadership. You deserve bold Republican leadership, but you are not getting that. You are getting weak fecklessness, and I'm sick and tired of Texas Democrats fighting harder for the future of our state and our nation than Texas Republicans. So, a very bad update. Special session 1 is in the tank. We'll probably have another special session called today, and I will keep you posted. I wish I had a better update, but I'll keep you informed. It's an honor to fight for your freedom and liberty. God bless you. God bless the great state of Texas.
Texas State Representative Brian Harrison, a Republican, posting that video outside the state capitol building in Austin, Texas, after the first special session was adjourned sine die, and Governor Greg Abbott did call a second 30-day special session with the same agenda. Texas House Minority Leader, Democrat Gene Wu, was on CBS News Texas on Thursday talking about his party's plans after denying a quorum for business for 2 weeks to block that congressional redistricting.
From the very beginning, we said that we have 2 major goals in breaking quorum, in being out of the state. And one was to kill this corrupt special session and force them to reset it and restart it, and hopefully listen to the people for once. And then the second thing was to try to convince other states that they need to now step up and take action to stop this, whether that is to stop them by scaring the Republicans into not doing it, by saying, like, if you do it, California do it, or as in the case now, where it just won't matter. If Texas does it, California will put up a bill that says if Texas redraws their maps, then they automatically get new maps, right? And we're basically making it pointless for the Republicans to keep doing this. I think we're on track to meet both of those goals very soon.
The Texas House Minority Leader Gene Wu, in an interview Thursday, he was also asked when the Texas Democrats will return to establish a quorum and allow legislation to move.
We decided to come to Illinois on our own. That was our decision because we were tired of their corruption and what they're doing. And when we go back, it will be on our terms. We will go back when we decide to go back, not when Governor Abbott tells us to go back. We listen to our people, we listen to our allies, and we work together to try to save the American dream and to save Texans. And our decision to go back is going to be no different.
And so no decision has been made on exactly which day you're going to return to Texas?
Not that we're going to share, at least.
Gene Wu is the minority leader of the Texas House of Representatives, a Democrat, on CBS News Texas on Thursday. CNBC writes that Federal Reserve President Austin Goolsbee said Friday a mixed bag of inflation data this week, coupled with lingering uncertainty over tariffs, have given him some hesitation about lowering interest rates. Previously, Goolsbee has spoken of a golden path that would combine moderating inflation and a stable labor market and lead to lower rates. But in a CNBC interview, Goolsbee said he still wants to see some more convincing data before the Federal Open Market Committee meets on September 16th and 17th. Goolsbee is one of 12 FOMC voters this year. That was from the CNBC article. Here he is on that network.
Well, it's been a little mixed. It feels like the first two of the four came in quite mild, and we were feeling good. And I was saying here and elsewhere, if we get several reports like that, I'm going to feel comfortable that we're still on the golden path and things be okay for rates to come down. We put in a note of unease, I'd say, in the last CPI and now PPI, with the inflation kicking up in categories that are not obviously going to be transitory, which is to say the services inflation looked to be turning up. So I feel like we still need another one at least to figure out if we're still on the golden path.
Austin Goolsbee, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, on CNBC, talking about the inflation data and the prospects for interest rates. Wall Street today, the Dow up 34, NASDAQ down 87, S&P down 18. Roll Call writes the Republican Michael N. Castle, a fixture in Delaware politics for a half-century, who previously served as governor and a member of Congress, died Thursday at age 86. In 2010, he entered the Republican primary for a special Senate election to fill the remainder of Joe Biden's term after Biden became vice president. But amid the anti-establishment Tea Party fervor in the Republican Party at the time, the moderate Castle lost the primary to Christine O'Donnell, who proved to be an unsuccessful general election candidate with a campaign ad proclaiming that she was not a witch. Democratic Senator Chris Coons won the general election and continues to hold the seat. That was from Roll Call. C-SPAN spoke with Mike Castle in late 2010 about losing that Senate Republican primary.
I don't regret it. It was something I thought would help the state of Delaware. I felt I was ready for it. I felt I could contribute to the Senate. I had a lot of support, both in Congress, in the Senate, and at home. And I thought it would work out. And obviously, I was caught up in a movement, and to their credit, they were very clever, and they took me out. So that's the way it happened.
And what would you have done differently? And as you answer that question, I'm curious as to, given that you said you regret maybe how you ran your campaign, what advice would you give to a moderate Republican in 2012 facing possibly an even stronger Tea Party type movement?
Well, first of all, I've given that advice to some people already. We've been talking. Secondly, my advice is they should be very cautious about this. We approach it from the point of view of we'll probably win the primary, but Christine O'Donnell could stay in after that. It's a write-in. She's done that before. And therefore, we'd have to deal with her and with the Democrat, and that's something we had to worry about. And obviously, we should have focused more on just the primary circumstance. And it's funny because Lisa Murkowski had called me after her loss, and I'd gotten to know her a little bit and said, be very careful. And I said, Lisa, we're all ready. She was ready, but I wasn't, I guess. And but I've told people to be cautious. They need to watch their voting. Not that they have to go from being moderate, as I was, to very conservative. You just need to be, very understanding and cautious about, what you're supporting, what you're voting on. You need to raise your dollars. You need to keep your profile with your political party. And I've been talked to by Republicans and Democrats, but keep your political profile high in your own party and go from there. But anybody who believes that the Tea Party movement, and I was taken out by a group called the Tea Party Express, is going to go away, I think is very mistaken. Maybe after a few more cycles or something, but I think in this presidential year coming up, there are going to be real players in the Republican Party, and I think real players in these congressional and Senate seats, and incumbent members of Congress who are not necessarily tied into the Tea Party, as I was not, should be very cautious about how they deal with this.
Former Congressman and Governor Mike Castle, Republican of Delaware, in a 2010 C-SPAN interview as he was leaving Congress, having lost that Senate Republican primary. Mike Castle has died at the age of 86. Roll Call article notes some of his accomplishments. Lead sponsor of the 2001 education law known as No Child Left Behind, initiated by President George W. Bush to tie federal education aid to improvements in student test scores. As a senior member of the Financial Services Committee, fighting for his home state's banking industry and championing the 50-state quarters program of commemorative coins. Joe Biden, former Democratic president and senator from Delaware, posting on X, Mike was defined by his integrity, and for that reason, you couldn't find another member of Congress who would say a bad word about him. All of us in Delaware owe Mike a debt of gratitude. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.